Yes, the CFMOTO 800 MTX has finally arrived in Austria and Germany. Over the past few days, we were traveling in Romania, specifically in Transylvania, to take on legendary roads like the Transfagarasan, the Transalpina, and the Strategica. This gave us a really great impression of CFMOTO's new vehicle. Stay tuned for a cool test report. I think some of you feel the same way we do. Really glad that the 800 MTX has finally arrived in Austria and Germany. It was already on display at ICMA and partly at Moto Austria as well, where you could actually sit on it and get really hyped up about the bike. But due to the change of importer, it took a bit longer for the vehicles to become available in Austria and Germany. But now the time has come and they are finally being delivered. I loaded it up, zipped off to Romania, and brought along a few other great toys to test over the next 10 days. Now there are only 5 days left. We've already been on the road for quite a while with the MTX and with other vehicles as well, and I think we've really managed to get a very good impression. Today's video is really about clarifying the details, discussing the seating position, ergonomics, how everything works, and how the MTX behaves. On-road. In the next few days, we'll be heading on to Bosnia. There I'll be taking the whole vehicle onto the TED Bosnia route up to Lukomir and other truly beautiful places. So there will be a separate video about the MTX's off-road performance because we'll also be taking off the luggage system and so on a bit. And part 3 will be a comparison with the current benchmark in the off-road sector, in my opinion, the Aprilia Touareg Rally. That's where the MTX will have to prove itself. We'll be making a comparison to see where the advantages and disadvantages of the MTX or the Touareg lie. So the whole thing will be structured more or less in 3 parts. So you can really look forward to impressive images and epic shots. That's about as much as I can reveal for now. And the area around me right now where I'm standing here in the middle of the Transfagarasan, it's just incredible. And I know that in Bosnia, we're definitely going to create even more amazing shots. So, to start off the video, let's take a look at the most important technical data, because now we really have production vehicles for the European market, for Austria and Germany, and now we can say exactly what's installed, what's included, and how the 800 MTX will be delivered in Austria and Germany. Let's start right away with the power unit, the engine of the 800 MTX, and here we have a pure 2-cylinder engine with 799 cubic centimeters. It delivers 95 horsepower at 8,500 RPM. And the maximum torque of 87 Newton meters is reached at 6,750 revolutions per minute. Now you might say, well, we more or less already know this engine. Yes, partly that's true. So the base engine has been used by KTM for years, but in the 800 MTX there are different balance shafts, the intake is different, the mapping is different, and of course the exhaust system is also a bit different. So in the core they're very similar, but here and there it's been adapted specifically for the 800 MTX and also for the safe engine for the 800 series. It has been adapted. If we take a look at the transmission next, there's a 6-speed manual gearbox with a blipper function installed. As standard, we have a quick shifter here which allows you to shift up and down without using the clutch. If we move on to the suspension, we've got a fully adjustable KIA suspension installed. At the front, there's an upside-down fork with a 48mm diameter, fully adjustable for rebound, compression and preload. Front suspension travel is 230mm. Rear suspension travel is also 230mm, and the rear shock is adjustable for rebound, compression, and of course spring preload. And if we look at the brakes, CFMOTO hasn't cut any corners here and in my opinion has installed proper anchors. At the front there are dual 320mm discs with 4 piston calipers. At the rear a single 260mm disc with a single piston caliper. The entire braking system, front and rear, is supplied by Changchuan, which is a subsidiary of Brembo. Next, let's take a look at the electronics package, everything that's installed, and also the features that simply can't be missing on the CFMOTO MTX. There are actually some really cool features built in. Let's start with the electronics package. The 800 MTX is equipped with a 6-axis IMU. That means we have lean angle sensitive traction control. We also have lean angle sensitive ABS installed here. We have a cruise control system installed as standard, and at the front there's an adjustable windshield which uses more or less the same mechanism we already know from the MT450. And we also have a built-in tire pressure monitoring system and a steering damper, which is anything but standard in this price range. But there are also features that, in my opinion, are really important for a touring enduro, like the fuel tank capacity. In that regard, the 800 MTX is very generously equipped with a 22.5-liter tank. The tank is deeply contoured, keeping the center of gravity very low, so I can already tell you from riding it. It's really cool. Seat height is 870 millimeters, and the weight, fully fueled, without, or rather, excluding the luggage system, front crash bars, and skid plate, is 220 kilograms. I'm 1.78 meters tall, have an inseam of about 80 to 88 centimeters, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'll just hop on, even on the 800. I'll fold up the stand, and you can see that my foot is still really bent at the knee. So if I stretch out my leg, I'd say for me on the 800 MTX, it could even be 88 centimeters. It looks relatively narrow in the middle, so the step through isn't too wide. From my point of view, I think you'd still get along well with a height of 1.70 meters. Let's take a look at the knee angle as well. That's also the case here, just like with its sister models, in quotation marks, that the foot pegs are set a bit further back than with some competitors. And so you always have a slightly sharper knee angle. But that's also an advantage, because when you want to push it a bit, when you're riding a bit more aggressively, you get a bit more, how should I put it, a bit more feeling in that area, and you sit a bit more sportily on the bike. But how it actually handles and what my first impression is, let's take a look at that from the rider's perspective. So now that I'm in the saddle of the 800 MTX, I want to talk a bit about the controls and everything, also show the display a little, go over the finer points in the menu, and then, let's move on to the riding footage. If we look to the left here, we have more or less the command center of the 800 MTX, a 4-way joystick, which you use to access the submenus accordingly. Up here is the cruise control, which you can turn on and off and use to set your speed. So it's really made very simple and truly intuitive. The clutch lever can be adjusted for reach with a dial. The brake lever is also adjustable for reach. What else do we have? Down here, the turn signal, horn, hazard lights, and the start button. And if we look forward, we can really see the windshield. So that's really an adjustment I also like on the MT450. Just use the big hand wheel to move it up and down easily. So then let's talk a bit more about the buttons. Here we have a mode button. If we press it, we basically activate the rain mode. We have the off-road mode or the standard mode. That means we have 3 modes here. The traction control is set according to the riding mode, so we can only turn the traction control on or off, but not adjust it individually. Otherwise, let's take a look at the display and then we'll really get going. In the center, we have the speed. Here we have the tachometer, then also the air pressure for the front and rear tires. And here we basically have a remaining range indicator. A special feature of the 800 MTX is the fuel level indicator. We can see that we're still full, even though we've already driven 150 or 200 kilometers. With this tank, you see F1-2. That means the MTX only shows you half the tank. Only when the tank is basically just 50% full does the float become active, and then you can see the fuel gauge go down. So let's start it up and see if it still has a sound in 2025 with Euro 5+. I'd say a precise sound, not CFMOTO, not quite as fitting. Like with the 450, but still, for today's standards, it actually sounds really cool. Alright, then let's set off as usual, shift through the gears, 4th, 6th gear. So that really works. The quick shifter functions really well, up, down, no problem at all. Also, when we take the first corners a bit faster in a moment, you really notice this low center of gravity, which is thanks to the mass being down low on the bike. And it really lets you lean into the curve very nicely and playfully, even if we push a bit harder right away. We brake a bit harder here. Down to second gear, lean it in. Yes, it does that very, very nicely. And then we come out of the corner again. The traction control kicks in from time to time. You don't see any blinking or jerking, but you just notice that if you get on the throttle a bit too early, you don't get the full power. But it's really well managed because it doesn't cut in abruptly or anything. Now let's take a look at the ergonomics as well. You really sit very comfortably up there, even when you're looking forward. It's definitely a substantial vehicle. It's not like a 450, that's for sure. This is really already a mid-range adventure bike. What stands out about the 800 MTX is that it's relatively long at the front, so there's definitely still about 10 to 15 centimeters in front of the display. When you sit on it for the first time, it feels a bit like it's really very long, but that's just the way it is because of the design, because of the headlight mask with LED lighting. That's how it's been done. In my opinion, the handlebar could be a bit higher and also wider because I noticed that I'm already grabbing at the edge here. Otherwise, the clutch and everything else are really very smooth to operate. The levers are also very easy to reach thanks to the adjustability. What else do I notice? The knee angle is also relaxed. That all fits so far. So let's talk a bit about the suspension. So the first feeling in the saddle, we're out here in the Transylvanian hinterland. On the route where the bears are also roaming around. I'll show you a few of them. We've already seen a few and filmed them a bit too. We didn't feed them because you're not allowed to do that. So you have to be a bit careful, but it's really amazing here. Near Sibiu, where we've settled in, Transylvania and so on. So this is really an area you absolutely have to visit at least once. Yeah, otherwise the suspension, let's get back to that a bit. From the factory, in my opinion, it's tuned to be very comfortable. When you ride it, you can just feel there's quality in your suspension. Up front, we have 48mm fork tubes, so that's really something wild. You don't often get 48mm. The Kayaba suspension is fully adjustable. And what I really like the most is when you brake a little, we lean in nicely, the rear shock is very smooth. It gets really bumpy there because the roads in the Romanian hinterland are anything but perfect. But that's exactly where an adventure tourer and also the 800 MTX really feel at home. And it really is very bumpy there. And that's where you notice that the suspension is, first of all, comfortable, and secondly, it really absorbs that initial bump, like a wave. You hardly even notice it. But if there's another wave, you do feel that one. But it compresses, absorbs that wave completely, really very smoothly, and not in a way that makes you bounce around like on a pogo stick, as we say in Austria, but rather very refined. So as far as the suspension is concerned, in my opinion, there's really decent hardware installed, and it really feels very high quality. Another first impression I had was about the brakes. Yeah, it's just Changchuan, so I really think the hardware side is good. But it's just that I think CFMOTO doesn't want to use aggressive or strong or more biting brake pads. Let's brake a bit harder at the front now. Yeah, it's okay. So better, definitely better than on the 450, but that initial bite, in my opinion, could... Oh, another Bearchi. Woohoo, now it's crossing the road. It's always a bit spooky when a bear comes by, but we were talking about the brakes. In my opinion, the initial bite could be a bit more aggressive. What I really love is this surfing out of the corner. You can lean it in so nicely. You don't need any pressure on the handlebars, really just with your head, with your mind, you push it in there, and then you can really surf out of the corner beautifully. So we'll ride a bit further, lean it in again there as well. Yeah, it's really cool with you. And of course, in this area back there, you can see the Transylvania, probably not on the GoPro right now. There we have a mountain lake. So this area is really beautiful. Yeah, that was kind of the first impression from the saddle. We'll see each other again for the final verdict. What a picturesque backdrop. Incredible. I have to admit here that I was, you could say, really very impressed when I first saw the 800 MTX at the ICMA and then also at Moto Austria, and was able to sit on it for the first time and test it out a bit, because I'm really convinced by the basic concept of the 800 cubic centimeter inline two-cylinder and also by the whole vehicle concept. With the deeply contoured tank and also the suspension components, it was the same in the sister models. Or rather, well, you can't really call it a sister model anymore these days, at least not right now. But I more or less knew, or I had an idea of how it should ride. Last year I was in Croatia with the 890, did a test report there. Feel free to check that out. And just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was with the Northern Expedition in the Alps. Also a very nice test report from my point of view, really with beautiful footage. So feel free to check that out if you want to know how, let's say, the similar models to the 800 MTX performed. That's the impression they made on me. That's why it was honestly super exciting for me to do this test here in the region around Transylvania or around the Transfagarasan, because my expectations were already very, very high. Were very, very high because you probably know how it is. You look at something, you sit on it, but you can't really test it or ride it yet. And then you think, great, fancy features, oh, the display, a very nice, expansive screen. And then you look here and there and you can already compare it with one or another sister model and you have a certain idea of how it should ride, but you haven't actually ridden it yet. And then, of course, there are, so to speak, two sides to the coin. On the one hand, there's a high risk that the whole thing will be disappointing, or let's say that the expectations I had will actually be met. That's as much as I can reveal for now. The expectations I had for the 800 MTX have been met, but why and how? That's what we're really going to look at now in detail and with regard to the individual components. The engine itself is more or less an old acquaintance from the sister models in the KTM 790 series. Now, they're not exactly sisters anymore, but it's been installed for years already. The engine block may be the same, but here we have different balance shafts, different air intake, and different mapping. On the MTX, we have 3 riding modes: standard, rain, and off-road. In off-road mode, you can deactivate the rear wheel ABS. In my opinion, the throttle response on the MTX is a bit more linear than on the sister model. There, in my view, it has less power at low revs, but a bit more power at higher revs, or rather, it delivers a bit more at the top end. With the 800 MTX, everything is relatively linear from around 4,500 RPM. At 7,500, there's a bit of a bump in the torque curve, I think, but it's somewhat limited. But I have to say, I really like the throttle response. I also think the 95 horsepower suits the MTX very well, especially when you're out and about like today, with the pannier system and everything. Fully fueled, we're probably looking at 240, 245 kilos, I would estimate. And that's including the massive skid plate. So with those 95 horsepower, especially when you're heading up into the high alpine areas, it's really a pleasure to ride. Let's also take a look at the tires and the traction control so we can round off the topic of the drivetrain. Just to give you a more complete picture, the CSD tire does exactly what it's supposed to do. I also have it on my 450 MT, which I own privately. I've already talked about that online. And over the winter, I made a lot of modifications to it. So feel free to check that out as well with the 450. But it's just not my favorite tire. It does what it's supposed to do. It doesn't slip around, but I just can't warm up to this tire. That's it. End of story. A lot of people swear by it. A lot of people are satisfied with it. Yeah, it's not my favorite tire. Now we come to the point that, in my opinion, was really the one that brought me the most joy, or was also the most surprising, because I really didn't expect it to work so well in the 800 MTX. So drum roll, you get 3 guesses. What was it? 1, 2, 3? No, I'll reveal it. It was the suspension. Kayaba suspension, fully adjustable, 48 millimeters in the front. Upside down fork inside. I think we're at a stanchion diameter that's basically on par with WP, like what's in the Norden, so really thick, chunky stuff. Fully adjustable in the front, fully adjustable in the back as well. The only drawback at the rear shock, the spring preload can only be adjusted with an Allen key, which isn't exactly ideal. A preload hand wheel would really be very practical there. So what is it that I like the most? It's really the smoothness of the suspension, the breakaway force of the suspension, that initial impact. When it comes to the suspension, or when I'm testing something, it's never about whether it can completely absorb a 1 meter drop, because that's not what I'm looking for, and probably not what many others are looking for either. What really matters to me with suspension is that breakaway force, that initial impact when you ride over something, that it doesn't just go thud, but rather that it's relatively smooth, that it really works like a cushioned ride. But at the same time, when things get faster, the whole thing doesn't feel spongy, but can actually perform accordingly. And the Kayaba suspension really can do that. So on the road, even when you're going fast, it's ultra stable. Plus there's a steering damper up front. You can really feel that to a good extent. Of course, when you really hit the brakes hard, the front dips down. That's just the travel of the suspension. That's clear, but it still remains very stable. When you're out riding with a load, like I am now, almost 90 kilos, heavy bones, I know some of you probably share the same fate, and with the pannier system fully loaded with camera gear and so on, then I would maybe set the rear shock a click or two harder, or maybe add a bit more preload. I haven't changed anything, I always ride it just as it comes from the factory. Maybe take out one click of compression damping at the front so that it becomes a bit smoother, and then from my point of view, it would really be perfect. Especially in this price segment where the 800 MTX is positioned, it's really incredible how the suspension responds, in my opinion. Especially when you look at the prices, Germany, 9,499 euros, so you can really be happy. Anyone living in Germany who's interested in the bike and hasn't given a thumbs up yet, now's really the time. I may not like the prices, but honestly, be happy, be glad. That you, just between us, sorry for the expression, don't have to deal with that stupid Nova tax. In Austria, it's 10,999 euros. So we have to pay 1,500 euros more for the same vehicle because with our contribution, we're supposedly saving the global climate. That's just a fact. So Austria with Nova, 10,999 euros. Germany without Nova, 9,499 euros. That's without the luggage set, but we'll take a look at that later. But if I'm so enthusiastic about the suspension, then I have to address the main point of criticism. That didn't surprise me, because it's the same issue that, in my opinion, is the main point of criticism with the CFMOTO MT450 as well, the brakes. Here we've got decent hardware installed. Up front, 320mm discs, 4-piston brake system, all from Changshuan, so not bad quality. At the back, there's a 260mm disc. I also know that the same brake system, probably with the same discs, is used in other models, and that it can work really well and allow for a bit more bite. But apparently CFMOTO really chooses very gently gripping brake pads. You do get a decent amount of pressure there, so when you see it, it really does slow down, it really does brake. You can, as I always like to say, really squeeze it in properly, that's for sure. But I would really hope, or rather expect, that with the material used in the brakes, the whole thing would have a bit more bite, a bit more initial bite. That's just on-road. How the whole thing will behave off-road, we'll see in the second video. It will probably be a bit better there, I can already reveal that much. Even on the road, so if you mainly ride on the street, if it were my bike, I would, just like I did with the 450 up front, swap out the brake pads and see if for this vehicle category, from my point of view, it would be a bit more suitable. But overall, of course, it does brake, so please don't get me wrong. You just have to pull properly, then it will slow down as it should, that's fine. But I would expect the brake pads to be a bit more aggressive. Then, in my opinion, it would fit the concept and also the suspension of the MTX a bit better. Alright, then let's move right on to the seat comfort. The seat itself is really very comfortable. You can sit in it all day, so I really like that a lot. It's also nice and wide back here, so you have plenty of space. The foot peg setup is a bit further back, which means you can ride the MTX in a relatively sporty way. As for wind protection, the windscreen adjustment on CFMOTO, also on the 800 MTX, is really sensationally good. Maybe some others should take a cue from that, because it's just so easy peasy with the dial. You can move the windscreen up and down while riding. The windscreen at the front, well, yes and no. For the look, for the whole package, because the MTX is supposed to be more off-road oriented than the regular 800 MT after all. For mountain passes like today or the past few days when you're spending a lot of time on the road, the windscreen could be a bit wider and a bit taller. Even in the highest position with my height, I still get a bit of turbulence up at the windscreen. As I said, if I were to use it a lot on the road, I might put a different windscreen on it. But if you're going more off-road, then it works well as it is, because you can lower the whole thing nicely. That way you get plenty of airflow to your upper body and the small windscreen doesn't obstruct your view ahead. So that's all good. Otherwise, what really stood out to me is that when you sit on it, the 800 MTX feels quite long towards the front. At first, that's a bit strange because this part up front extends a good 20 centimeters forward. Most bikes usually end right about here. So the bike feels relatively long, but not in a way that makes you sit passively on it. You can actually ride it very actively, and that fits well with the riding position and the knee angle on the MTX. If we take a look at the TFT display, the menu navigation, the buttons and the controls, it's all really intuitive. You can also turn the cruise control on and off up there. Press down, then you set the cruise control, hold it, and it jumps up by 10, down by 10, and so on. The menu navigation is very well done. There's a 5-way joystick in there, well, let's say a 4-way joystick, and then the enter button. You can really operate it very precisely, and the display is very easy to read. And what's really awesome, and probably nobody has told you this yet, is that there's a hex screw back here on the 7-inch DFT display, which lets you adjust the tilt of the display. So show me another manufacturer where you can adjust the tilt of the original display. You can adjust it a few degrees forward or backward. But I have to say, these are the little features that I've always really liked about CFMOTO. This way, you can adjust everything to fit your height because the viewing angle is obviously different whether you're 1.50 meters tall or 1.90 meters. If I sum up my impressions from the past few days with the 800 MTX, I can really only congratulate CFMOTO from my perspective. Because in this price category, they've put a vehicle on the market that really makes others, in my opinion, have to step up their game, since we know the concept works. The 95 horsepower, the inline twin-cylinder, also with the well-tuned gearbox and the blipper function. Then there's the deeply contoured tank, and even the suspension is extremely good for this price range. And it's also fully adjustable, so you can really play around with it if it doesn't fit you perfectly right away. From my point of view, it's really extremely well done, and visually I also find the MTX very appealing, especially from the front with the LED lights and so on. And then what's really cool about CFMOTO are the little gimmicks, like the adjustable windscreen, the fact that you can adjust the display, you have a USB-C port on board, you have a temperature gauge as standard, all these little extras plus the applications and so on. Also, the plastic on the side isn't just black but has a bit of a camouflage look. In my opinion, all of this really contributes to a very modern, youthful vibe. I think the vehicle looks really fresh, especially in this color scheme with the turquoise and pink. On the one hand, it's very bold, but I'd say this is really a very specific customer group that CFMOTO is targeting with the 800 MTX. Yes, and if you really take a closer look at the prices, in Austria you're looking at roughly 11,000 euros rounded to put down on the table, including the Nova. In Germany it's 9,500 euros. That's the amount you need to put down at the dealer, and the transfer costs are already included. And there will also be, just like you see here, an additional package available. This includes upper crash bars, a skid plate underneath, and a 3-piece luggage set. A top case is also included. Is not mounted here, but it will also be available. The price for this will be between 12,000 and 13,000 euros, and the cases are really lined with felt on the inside. So you're really getting good quality with what's included, and I can really only recommend it to you. Go to the CFMOTO dealers and take a look at the vehicles yourself. They will already be available by the time this video is online. Take a test ride because I think a lot of you will really enjoy it. And if you enjoyed spending time with me and the 800 MTX today, then definitely leave a thumbs up. Also, write your opinion about the 800 MTX in the comments below. Is it a vehicle where you say, yes, exactly, for the price, 11,000 euros in Austria, 9,500 euros in Germany with that equipment? So hats off, that's really impressive. Or do you say, well, that's all just too heavy again? Nobody needs that. Let us know down below in the comments for sure. And would it be interesting for you if I completely rebuilt the 800 MTX over the winter, just like I did with the 450 MT last year? If I started a new conversion project, let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. Next week, we'll continue with an off-road test report from the TED in Bosnia. Until then, I wish you all the best and see you next time. Ciao, ciao.